So it's time to get started. Finally, hi everyone, and a very warm welcome to this live webinar on determining what impacts end user video quality the most. My name is Astrid Weding Langdell, and I'm VP of Marketing here at Edgeware. And for those of you who are not familiar with Edgeware, we are a Swedish-based company providing solutions for multi-CDN delivery control and OTT content processing. So this webinar is based on a survey we did together with the streaming media expert Dan Rayburn back in May earlier this year. And Dan is with us today to present the survey together with Peter Sergel, who is a business developer here at Edgeware. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to you, Dan.
Great, thanks very much. Thanks everyone for attending today. I'd like to thank Edgeware for having me and welcome Peter. Peter and I are going to have a discussion today about the data. And we do realize that there are quite a lot of webinars taking place right now, as you know, in the industry. So we appreciate you being here today. And what we're going to do is give you a lot of really good information. We're going to keep it short. We want to keep this webinar within 30 minutes so you can get back to your work you need to do. And we also want to make it interactive. So if you have questions at any time during the webinar, please do send them in. If we don't get to your questions during the event, we will get you answers afterwards. Also, all the data that you're going to see today is going to be made available as a PDF download. So you'll receive an email with an archive to the webinar and also a PDF where you can download all the data. Now, today, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on some of the highlights of a few of the questions we asked. So let's jump right into it. A little bit about the survey. I went out to content owners, publishers, broadcasters, OTT service providers, and cable companies and asked them 13 questions in May of this year. So it was right in the middle of the pandemic sort of height. And these were people responsible for making decisions at these companies when it comes to the technology platforms and video stack. So we had exactly 250 respondents. And you can see the monetization model that they were all using as well. We also asked just what percentage of those that we were surveying, what was their business model, advertising, subscription, marketing, transactional, or sponsorship. That way you have a good understanding of who we really surveyed. So that's an overview of who we talked to and how many. Let's just jump right into it. So I'm going to welcome Peter onto the line here. Peter's definitely going to talk to some of the highlights of what we're seeing in the data and what the relevance is. What we want to do with the data is give everyone an understanding of what your peers are seeing and also what the key takeaways are. So this particular question we asked was, does your customer experience QoE related issues? And if so, what do they do when that happens? So it's no surprise that we all know that when viewers have issues with startup or buffering or rebuffering, many times they'll leave or they'll go somewhere else. But it was interesting here that almost 40% said that customers will make a couple of attempts to play back video and then quit. And then some of the others were just talking about they know there's QoE issues, but they can't actually tell what they're doing. So Peter, what are the consequences of one of the bullet points here is a lost customer, but more importantly, how do they measure what the QoE is to know if they're losing a customer?
Yeah, I think it's really good to see here that there is a QoE focus in the business because customers experiencing quality of service, quality of experience issues churn at some point. And look at this guy, for instance, he's sitting there with his waste bag, or maybe it's popcorn, and he's just about to watch the evening show there, and he gets really pissed when the quality is not there. And this leads to churning customers in the long run, and that's loss of customer lifetime value. Just as a comparison in the mobile industry in Europe, the mobile operators have an average of 14% churn of their mobile subscribers. And that means that each customer actually stays for 7 years with their mobile operator. And just drawing the parallel to video there, this means that if you lose a customer, you lose a lot of revenue over many, many years.
Yeah, and I think that's a key point that people miss, right? One of the bullet points here is we're talking about customer lifetime value. It seems in our industry around streaming video services, one, churn isn't talked about much. A lot of these companies don't release any details on churn. But when churn is talked about, it's thought of as, okay, I lost that customer for the next month. But to your point, you're potentially losing them for what could be a multi-year period. It's a much more lost revenue, I think, than people realize. Now we're going to go into the next question, which is talking about monitoring video quality. So one of the things that we wanted to know was, this question was, which 3 real-time parameters would be the most important to you? And what we saw here is that lots of attendees want data. They want data about what's taking place, and they want the data to be granular. It's not just high-level overview of percentage of people having a problem or not having a problem, but what type of problem are they having? What is the region they're having it in? How does the experience that they're having impact cost? So lots of data here that's wanted. Peter, talk to, what are the most important pieces of data here that you see customers routinely asking for, and also some of the pieces of data that they don't have access to currently?
Yeah, I think the most important thing here is to see that it's an even spread of what people want. So basically you can say everyone wants everything, and this is right. I previously come from a company working with artificial intelligence in customer communications, and I often got the question from customers there, what data should we store? And the response was basically store everything that is economically possible to store, because you never know when you need the data, and you do not know at the beginning what data you want to correlate with new data that you have later on, which actually could be the weather in a certain region. So store everything you can for future purposes, and of course act upon the data. That's also something that's becoming more and more important.
Yeah, acting on it is important. And the 2 highest answers here, percentage-wise, was, notice it was per user and per region, which I also thought was interesting because it shows how customizable they want the data. Another question we asked around this topic was, which content protection means would be the most valuable to enhance your platform with? And what we see here is watermarking, certainly important. Then you also say VPN, proxy detection, but then 37.6% said both of the above. So what is some of that new functionality that's really wanted there, Peter, when it comes to protecting content?
Yeah, I mean, the reason why we group these 2 questions or responses together is that basically you want everything, and we would like to initiate sort of a discussion. Where should you keep this functionality? Should you keep it server side, or should you keep it client side, or should you have both? Because there are different advantages for both things. For instance, server side, you have central control of everything, so that you want to have control over the security mechanisms, of course, but you also want to be server side to be able to react on the data very fast before buffers run out in the clients. And the other hand is that if you go client side, you can see a lot more user behavior as well. So maybe the truth is in the middle there, to have a little bit of both.
Yeah, I would think so. It's both of them. So the next question we asked here was, do you know your customer's experience? And I like this, blind or behind, right? Which one really are you? So we asked, are you using any kind of end user QoE analytics solution to measure video quality? And if you are you using that input from that solution as part of your multi-CDN sourcing? So as we know, most of the largest customers out there, and even mid-tier customers that are delivering video through third-party CDNs, are using a multi-CDN approach, where they're splitting up traffic, sometimes per platform it's being delivered to, sometimes based on just even split of share of traffic, sometimes it's based on the hardware someone's playing back on. So we asked, are they using that data to actually do their selection process? And it was interesting to see that 32% have a solution to configure policies for CDN selection, but almost just as many, almost 30%, didn't have a QoE analytics solution at all. And that's a real problem, because the key takeaway there is, as we see here as it comes up.
Yeah, I would say here that 16.4% of the respondents here are best in class. They are top notch. They are very much in real time to mitigate potential problems that are occurring in the distribution network. But as you can see here, 54.4%, they can see that the customers have problems, but they cannot do anything without it within the buffering time that the client-side player has. And of course, we have these 30% that can't see anything, that's those ones that are blind, so to speak.
And think of how big that number is, right? We're talking 54, more than half of the customers have a problem but can't fix it within that time. And just to give people an idea, why I won't mention companies by name, those who filled out the survey and gave us data, these are some of the largest content owners, OTT providers, distributors that all know of by names, right? These aren't tiny, small SMB companies. These are leading companies out there that are doing leading sporting events and SVOD content and whatnot. So the fact that half of them know they have a problem but can't fix it within that allotted time of buffering, tied into a multi-CDN sourcing strategy, is definitely a major problem. So when you think about it, Peter, 83.6% in total are either blind or behind. And when we see this number here, we see just how big of a problem it actually is.
Yeah, especially when it comes to live traffic or live events, as you mentioned there, in the sports or events.
Yeah, especially for specific use case applications, for sure. And with sports, we know everybody expects a certain level of quality that's typically higher and closer to broadcast TV. So the next question we asked was around, what affects the end user experience the most, and what if you could really isolate that? So 30% said it was issue specific to CDN. Almost 30% more said it was something outside of the CDN's control. Almost 20% didn't know, and just over 20% said it was a customer Wi-Fi problem. So Peter, if we look at this, and not surprising in terms of the results here in the numbers, if you could solve that CDN problem, that would alleviate a huge portion of the QoE issues that customers are having.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking on how I could complicate this simple picture in a way so that no one actually understood what I was saying. But if we say that 1/3 has issues specific to the CDN, and 1/3 has internet network congestion problems, and 1/3 has Wi-Fi problems. So imagine if you could mitigate those CDN problems, as you said, and handle those within the buffer time so that the users would not even notice anything. Then you only have 2 portions of problems left. And if you had solutions to identify which problem is which, so that you actually know if you have an internet network congestion problem for these specific users in an area, if you could isolate those problems, then you could start to automate your customer service, because then you know that the customers calling in have Wi-Fi problems, and there you have a potential for savings on the operational side.
Have we seen, Peter, or do you have information on, I can't remember any numbers off the top of my head, but any type of savings that we've seen customers talk about just in terms of measuring, monitoring, and fixing QoE results in X percentage of saved money just from people not having to call into support? I mean, if I think about, right, anytime I have to pick any OTT provider, Hulu, Netflix, the moment you have to call into them and contact them, it's costing them money.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure how relevant the data is from my previous work in other parts of the telecommunications chain, but at least like $15 per customer care call that comes in terms of the handling cost. So of course there is a lot of money to be saved if you can start to automate things.
Yeah, I mean, so let's say that number is accurate, right? $15, and just, I don't know, pick Disney Plus, right? $6 a month, $5 a month. You're talking about 3 months worth of the service just from that one call. So it's a big lost amount of revenue.
Yeah, but I think the most important thing here is if you can solve 1/3 of the problem without the customer even noticing it, even that is a really good start.
Yes, no doubt. So next question was, if you're using a third-party CDN, how long does it take for them to notify you of a performance problem that's really impacting QoE? And It's good to see that 30% get immediate notification, what they defined as real time. 25% said the notification typically takes more than a minute. And then we have a different breakdown here in terms of it varies based on CDN, but also notice that the question we asked here was, how long does it take for them to notify you? What we didn't, and what this numbers aren't saying is how long it takes to actually fix it, right? That's definitely a different thing. So Peter, talk to just what this fragmented data really tells us.
Yeah, one thing I want to pick up on was that you did a webinar earlier that I listened into, where 75% of the streaming, broadcast streaming industry was now looking at implementing multi-CDN as a distribution method. And so that is getting more and more common, and everyone is looking at it. However, since all the CDN handle this differently, it's very difficult to get the common view. And this means actually that the provider or the content owner or a rights holder has very limited capabilities of having a central control over their distribution network. And it's their name and their logo that's out there. So what you want to do is bring home that type of control so that you actually can control your customers' quality of experience, instead of having that, yeah, we heard it from our viewers. And coming back to, if you click once, coming back to this guy sitting there and watching there, I think a new quote would be, in some cyberspace, no one can hear you streaming.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
Thanks for all the laugh.
And I think, I wasn't sure there first when you said streaming or screaming, but it's definitely true. And I think one thing also that you are highlighting is that there's no standard in the industry in terms of how this is being measured or controlled. Right? The fact that 15.2% said, well, it varies from CDN to CDN and times very widely and different. Well, if you're actually a content owner and you're working with, in some cases, 2, 3, 5, I know some companies use 6 different CDNs. Imagine trying to manage that when it's different across all the different CDNs. So in summary, let's talk about some of the things here that the survey really shows. Peter, I'm going to let you talk to these just in terms of, this isn't all the data we collected. And again, you'll be able to download after the webinar all the data and all the questions we asked. But let's talk about what the best practices and takeaways are from the data that we've seen today.
I think it shows that everyone is concerned about managing the quality of experience, and the reason for that is, of course, to reduce churn and thereby also mouth-to-mouth secure uptake. And by doing that, it means that you actually should monitor everything you can, as we saw on one of the first slide there. Measure everything you can and try to mitigate these problems before the buffers in the players run out, so that the users don't see any of these problems on their screens. And the next part there is basically save money and time on support handling. We saw that what affects the quality in the distribution was CDN issues, internet congestion problems, and Wi-Fi problems. And the survey shows that if a customer or a streaming provider could isolate and mitigate some of these problems, identify the congestion problems and identify the Wi-Fi problems and mitigate the CDN problems, you have come a very long way on the way to better quality of experience. But that also means that you could potentially start to automate some parts of the support process. And the last point is the disparate view that you have going multi-CDN, because everything is monitored differently, should be very important for the streaming providers to take the central control, since they own the customer experience, and take control over the distribution networks. And I also want to highlight one thing there when it comes to client side or server side. There are a lot of user behaviors within the client side solutions that you need to have in order to know how your users are behaving. But then you also need server side solutions in order to be fast enough to mitigate problems before they occur on the screen, and you also want to take control over piracy and those type of solutions that you probably would like to have in a central location in the network, and where you also can add new services like server-side ad insertion and personalization and the development of new types of services.
And we're going to get into questions in a minute, Peter, but I'm going to, before we get to that, ask you just a few follow-up things here in the summary. Is there seems to be a lot of talk in our industry about data collection and I would say figuring out or measuring what's happening. But we don't tend to hear a lot in the industry about, okay, now how do you actually act on that? Right? I feel like we're almost in an early phase one of, okay, let's make sure that we measure. And people keep talking about performance, right? And they give out a lot of numbers, but then you don't hear them talk about, okay, but now that you have that data and you see what the problem is, how do you actually implement something to fix it? When do you really think we focus as an industry more on that?
I think it's coming now with more and more live events being distributed over these type of infrastructures. And I mean, we need to be honest. I mean, there is a lot of data collection going on, even if it's not real time. So you have a lot of data on how the quality of experience is out there, and you can act upon that for the next event. But not so many, as we have seen in this survey, can act during the event and save the quality drops for the customers once they're happening.
Yeah, agreed. Well, we're going to go in the Q&A portion of the event. I'm going to have Peter talk to the slide just 1 second, but if you have a question, do send it in. We're going to get to 2 or 3 questions. Again, we want to keep this to 30 minutes for you. We're almost there. If you don't get your question answered during the event, we'll answer your question offline once the event's over. And for anyone who may be jumping into the webinar late, the webinar will be available for viewing on demand, and we will make all the questions from the survey available in the PDF download. So Peter, talk to this slide real quickly in terms of how Edgeware is doing this, and then we're going to jump into Q&A.
Yeah, I think people have read what's on there, and it's sales enough basically. But what we could add is that we have done this for quite some time, building hardware for the industry, and now focusing on software services in the range of taking control over your delivery mechanism and deliver a better quality of experience without having extensive client integrations, which means that you can reach all your customers very fast with the central functionality.
Good. So let's go into Q&A. We'll do a couple questions here. If you have a question, just put it into the box there. We'll get to it. Peter, I've got 2 already that I want to start with. The first one, this is a good question, one that you get asked when it comes to a lot of solutions, talking about QoE and performance, but somebody wants to know, all this sounds good, but how expensive is it to actually put a solution like this in place? And obviously it depends on what exactly you're trying to monitor and how you're looking to take control. But I think what would be helpful is I want to make sure that everybody has the impression that, you know, it's not just the Netflix of the world that can do this, right? You don't have to have close to 200 million subs. You don't have to have millions of dollars a year to implement this. So how easy and efficient and affordable is it to do?
Yeah, it's really difficult to say that without knowing the volumes, but from our perspective, it's volume-based technology and the cloud services that we're working with. So we have accommodated at least our pricing in order to be able to take small customers all the way up to really large ones. So it's difficult to answer that question actually.
Yeah, so okay, so maybe I'll answer then a little bit differently, right, as an industry observer. So, you know, in many cases, I am seeing customers sometimes spend between 1% and 2% of their total monthly bill with CDNs on QoE performance, data collection analysis, and potential implementation and how to fix problems. So yes, to Peter's point, it changes. It's like, you know, what does a new car cost? It depends what you want to do with it. But my point is, you do not need to be Netflix to do this, right? You can do this as a smaller provider. It is totally affordable. It's something that, keep in mind, there's an immediate business value and return on investment for you. You don't have to figure out what is the benefit to my business. You know the benefit right away.
No, it's a very small portion of the total cost for this, the solutions, and you probably get that back very fast in terms of higher quality of experience and lower churn.
Yes, for sure. So let's go to another question, Peter, regarding bitrate shaping. So during the pandemic, we saw some of the largest streaming providers out there reducing bit rates because of what was some perceived problems by regulators and others who really don't understand how the internet works, about potential congestion and problems. So what the companies did was simply remove bit rates, their highest bit rates. But is that really good enough in terms of reducing quality by removing the higher bit rate? Right, that's an easy way to do it and it's easy to implement, but is it really the best way when you're doing bit rate shaping?
That's a good question. Obviously, it solved the problem. I mean, I think we all have been working from home now for many months, and at least there has been enough bandwidth for the ones I know that have been working from home. But if you don't have to reduce the bandwidth, why should you? And why should everyone get lower QE when everyone is not having the same bandwidth limitations? So why not start use solutions where you can reduce bandwidth in certain regions based on the network quality in that region, or certain devices? If people are on mobile devices and mobile networks, why should you deliver 4K to those customers? And in the long run, why you can even differentiate on customers based on premium account and non-premium accounts. So there are many ways of handling this in a way that don't affect everyone.
Yeah, agreed. Let's do one more question, Peter. And this one is, I said earlier in the beginning when we started that I mentioned the word personalization, I believe, because it's something we hear a lot in the industry. And industry-wide, we hear a lot of vendors and content owners and OTT platforms talking about how they feel that their solutions are personalized, right, per viewer. And I would disagree as a consumer. I really don't think it's personalized much for me as of yet. And personalization, they don't really ever define it other than say things like, oh, well, we're providing a better recommendations for you. Where do you think the industry can really go as far as personalization when it comes down to the experience? Because we use the term the user experience as a collective industry, but there's two different types of experiences. Obviously, there's a content experience, the type of content you like to watch and the genre, maybe what your favorite actor or subject is. But then there's the true user experience. And one of the things I'm thinking of is the merger of the two, right? If you can actually personalize the user experience down to the user based on a QoE statistic or metric you have, and use that to shape their experiences in real time, isn't that true personalization now for the industry?
Definitely, that is true personalization, and that is possible to do. But one thing that we have also seen an increasing interest from is to basically group people together and give them a lean back experience, which is personalized, but you belong to a group that enjoys the same type of lean back experience. So it doesn't mean that you need to be super engaged when watching your TV and select all your camera angles yourself. It could be that you follow an influencer that selects the camera angles for you, for instance. So I think that we will see both sides here. The personalization, definitely, when it comes to ads and recommendations on video on demand and so on, but also more and more live events that you will see in different versions as a group. So people following one certain team in American football, for instance, they get one specific view with one set of commentators, for instance, and the ones following the other team get another specific view and other commentators.
Yeah, I think that's something that we're moving towards as an industry. It just feels like it's it's certainly taking a long time. 25 years later, it feels like we need more personalization. I think part of what we're showing today in these results of the data is the more QE data that content owners, broadcasters, and OTT platforms can collect and then make real-time decisioning on it, the better experience we're all going to have as consumers. So We're going to end now with questions because we're actually at 30 minutes, which we want to keep it at. So if you sent in a question and didn't get it answered, we apologize, but we will get you a question. We will get you an answer offline once the event's over. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. I'd like to thank Edgeware for allowing me to do this and collect the data on their behalf, which was great. You know, as an industry, we need a lot more data. Peter, thank you very much for coming and talking about some of the highlights and the best practices here of what we're seeing. And you'll be able to see the full survey report. You can see the link on your screen here. And also, please feel free to reach out to Peter and myself directly. You know, we made sure that we listed our personal emails here so you can reach out to us directly with any follow-up questions, things you want to know more. You should definitely reach out to Peter if you want more details on how to implement some of the best practices, what type of QoE data is actually being collected right now by some of the customers that they have. I always say to customers, it's really important that you talk to your peers in the space, right? Talk to what your competitor is doing. Many times they'll talk about things like QoE and improvement of video service because it helps us all. So if you have any questions, please do reach out to us. Thanks again for attending. Hope everyone has a great day, and we'll see you on the next webinar. Thank you.
And a big thank you to you as well, Dan. It's been a joy working with you.
Thank you very much.